everyone. And thank you all for being here. And I will call this special meeting of our Town Plan and Zoning Commission to order on Monday, January 4th at 6:15 p.m. Happy New Year to one and all. Hope you all had a happy, healthy, restful holiday. For my commission members, I only get to see on these types of occasions. The members who are with us tonight are Kathleen Wallace, Larry Greenberg, Yoni Zamir, Paul Schatz, Andrew Skolnick, Jeff Kennedy, and myself. I didn't miss anyone, did I? I don't think so. We're, as always, supported ably by Chris Sullivan, our town land use analyst and zoning enforcement officer, and Bessie Yagla is here to help with the WebEx and logistics, which, as we all know, requires a little bit of patience. So it is appreciated from everyone participating because we are operating this hearing remotely under the auspices of the governor's order to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So thank you in advance for your patience. Thank you to all the attendees, the panelists, the folks who are going to be hearing from the public. I ask that if you're not speaking, please do have your audio on mute, and so please do so now. Tonight's special meeting is a continuation of our public hearing from November 30th. And this public hearing, the continuation tonight, will only be able to run until 7:20 p.m. and it will be continued to a later date that I'll announce at the end of this special meeting, which will enable anyone who doesn't have a chance to talk today will definitely have a chance to talk at our next gathering. I also want to give another note on process that the Board of Selectmen have authorized our Land Use Council, who is with us here today, Marianne Dubuque, to have her firm retain a planning consultant to assist us in reviewing the pending applications. And we're going to talk more about that consultant and receive his or her input in the future. So that's just a note in the future. Last for me is a note, a friendly reminder about communications. And I do see we do have a whole lot of attendees and participants, a large number of folks, and I do appreciate everyone taking the time today. While the public hearing is open, written comments are going to be accepted and considered by our TPC members, but they have to go through a process. They have to go through the legal submission process, which means they really have to only be sent in to Christine Sullivan, who's on the call tonight. Her email is ksullivan@woodbridgect.org, or you can use old-fashioned mail, or you can drop something. I think Town Hall will still let you drop things off. I don't know if you're allowed to go into Town Hall at 11 Meeting House Lane. This is because of Connecticut law. Connecticut law requires that the TPC conduct our business in open meetings like this one and as a collective body, and doesn't allow for individual ex parte, is what they call it, conversations behind the scenes. So that's why we need folks to send their comments, which we welcome, directly to Christine Sullivan. And I raise this because recently there was a flyer that was distributed throughout Woodbridge that contained the email addresses of all of our TPC zoning TPC members, and requested the public reach out directly to us. We were advised by the attorney that that's unfortunately not allowed. So we can't actually read the emails that you're sending to us directly. They have to go through this legal process of going first to Chris Sullivan to be part of the public record, so everyone can see them, and they're available on the public website. When they are part of that public record, that's when we get to actually read them, and we will, and we do. And you have all really expressed a whole lot of interest in this, and that's exactly the purpose of a public hearing like this, is to get your comments and your voices heard. But the only way we can do that is by following the rules, and the rules say they have to go first and only to Chris Sullivan, and then they get distributed to us, and she scans them all and sends them to us, and then we do read them as part of the record for this proceeding. So those are the rules. Just wanted to make sure everyone knows them. I know that they don't, you wouldn't necessarily know them unless we explain them, which is why we're doing this tonight. And Paul, I see your hand, and I'll get to you in one moment. I just have one last note that for transparency and fairness, the flyer that was actually sent to everyone is going to be added to the record. So that's going to be part of the official public record as well. So the applicants and anyone else participating can know what's in that flyer and respond to it if they wish to do so. Paul, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, Rob, could you or Chris explain to those who emailed commission members, how those emails were going to get treated, if they were sent to, I'll back up. Are all emails that included Chris Sullivan in them now part of the public record?
Yes, I would assume
The answer is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And so that's the key. The emails that came to us with Chris Sullivan made it to Chris Sullivan, and we are going to not read them ourselves. We're going to have Chris Sullivan gather, compile, and then send them to us formally. That's the step. Now, if anyone who's listening or on video or whatnot didn't include Chris Sullivan, they need to resubmit. They need to, and apologies for that. We can't guarantee, and you don't want to see my inbox, it's a mess, that we might miss your filing, we might ignore it, we may not see it. That's why having that one email, one repository is important. So anyone who may have submitted it and is not sure whether they included Chris Sullivan or not, please send or resend to Chris Sullivan, because we do want to make sure that your voice is part of that public record. Kathleen, I thought I saw your hand. I do see it.
Yeah, you said that flyer is going to be a part of the public record, but it has the wrong email address on it. It has my work email and not my private email. My private email is the one I use with TPZ. Can that email be struck from that flyer?
I don't think so, but I'm looking at my
shaking her head no. I just people overstepped.
Right, but I think in fairness to members of the public that did not overstep and to the applicants, it's important that we put the flyer in the record. We can put a disclaimer at the top that these email addresses are not to be used. If that's helpful, we can put that as a notation and then attach the flyer. But I feel very strongly, and that's why I'm recommending to the TPC that they include it to be transparent. No, because there shouldn't be information that's not available to all sides of this issue.
Yeah, no, I support that. I'd even, I mean, if that disclaimer can be added, that would be fine. I'd even be happy if that email were crossed out and my other email were put on there. It's just that there was, wrong information shared.
Right, but I don't want to include new emails, and I don't feel we should alter what was submitted throughout the town. Is that?
Yep. Okay, I get it.
So thank you both. Thank you, Kathleen and Paul, for the questions, and Marianne for the clarification. And again, thank you to the public. You are definitely tuned in and want to have your voices heard. And that's what I want to get to with the bulk of our time today. Betsy and Chris, I hope our hand raising function works, because I'm going to rely on that. The next sort of steps in the logistics, we're continuing, as I said, the public hearing from November 30th. There was a presentation of the applicants. We then the public had an opportunity to speak, and several did. After several hours, we continued the meeting to today. And I want now, again, because we're in public hearing mode, want to give the public the opportunity to speak first. So this is the point in time where our public members can use the WebEx hand raise function. It is in my window, it's kind of in the lower right-hand corner where, in the list of participants or whatnot. And when you raise your hand, you'll be acknowledged and you'll be given the opportunity to talk for 3 minutes. Before I get there, I have one last bit of housekeeping. And I know that Attorney Herbst is there I thought I saw him just a moment ago on the web. Oh, I see him. Thank you. And Attorney Herbst, who represents a group of residents, requested an opportunity to address the TPZ. He submitted a letter on December 8th confirming that request. And we are going to give Attorney Herbst an opportunity tonight after the public speaks. So we hopefully will get to you, Attorney Herbst, and I appreciate your patience if the public goes longer tonight, but you'll definitely be able to come up in our next continuation of this hearing. There's one procedural issue. Attorney Herbst requested the opportunity to cross-examine or ask questions of the applicant's witnesses. And Attorney Boggs and Professor Lamar filed a letter on December 23rd, 2020, stating their position that the TPC had the discretion to allow cross-examination. And our TPC attorney, Attorney Dubuque, had notified Attorney Boggs and Professor Lamar and Attorney Herbst on December 24th, right before the holiday, that she would recommend to us that we allow this cross-examination, as the theme of this beginning is in the best interest to have a comprehensive record and fairness to all participants. So I will call for a motion to allow Attorney Herbst to conduct cross-examination of the applicants.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion amongst commission members? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay. Attorney Herbst, thank you, and thank you to our applicants, Attorney Boggs and Professor Lamar. Okay, now to the public, and now hopefully in that time I see there are a few hands at least raised, and I hope that they show up in your list, Betsy, if you're the one managing.
Yes, I can see them.
Great. So for each of our members of the public, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and I'm just pulling up my timer on my Indy phone. And I will try to, if I interrupt you, I will be trying to say to wrap it up. And if you're just finish that last thought, but please try to get to your comments focused, under 3 minutes or under. And rest assured, that's the purpose of the public hearing, is so that we are listening to you. Now, the TPC members are not going to answer questions or respond to you directly, but they're all listening, and this will now be, your comments will be part of the public record. So with that, I think let's get started with our public comments. And Betsy, do you want to call out the names?
Sure. So we've got Debbie Brander up first. Debbie, I'm going to unmute you, and when you're done with your comments, please click the hand icon again to get out of line to speak. Go ahead, Debbie.
All right. Thank you, Betsy. Thanks, everyone. I just wanted to, I'll try to be brief. I want to say to everyone, all of our neighbors listening and the commission members, that I do support housing diversity, but there's no way I can support this proposal. I think, as we all have learned, this is not about 2 Orchard Road. This is a town-wide application that could result in apartment buildings popping up like polka dots all over town. And I think this plan really lacks some basic rights for privacy and basic quality of life for the future residents. Putting aside our current residents, the plan that has to be made should come from Woodbridge, shouldn't come from out-of-town developers, shouldn't come from law interns. It should come from our own town, should come from TP&Z. Because I feel so strongly about this, I just can't imagine who would want to live in one of these apartment buildings. I'm sure other people will talk about the sharing of resources with well and septic. I think parking is an issue. This building or others like it could yield easily 14, 15, 16 people as an 8-bedroom. In fact, if you look at the HUD.gov website, 5 people are easily allowed in a 2-bedroom dwelling. So when you talk about the eyesore of a big open surface parking lot that's bigger than some of our commercial properties, the truth is that 9 spaces isn't even enough. So you're denying people the ability to have a vehicle. They're denying these potential new residents the ability to have privacy and quality of life, to have a birthday party or a book club. There's nowhere for them to park. And if they don't have a car, they're out of luck because there's no public transportation. And before people get going down the road of, well, we should increase public transportation, Woodbridge is already on the chopping block for New Haven Transit. So the chances of them increasing service is like slim to none. They're trying to decrease it, actually. So I just feel like with all of those people that are living in a building, I think that these public forums, the heated Facebook debates, the neighborhood arguments are just going to continue and continue. And Woodbridge has to come up with a plan on our own to do the right thing about housing diversity and meet the state mandates that we need to meet. I would urge the commission to deny this application and really get busy formulating a plan that will work for Woodbridge, be respectful of all of our current residents, be respectful of our future residents, perhaps create a housing authority to help with oversight of this, conduct site visits to peer communities that have these types of apartment buildings, maybe create opportunity zones that can attract the right kind of development so we can do the right thing and solve this problem. So I know other people will talk about certain other issues, but one other component of this apartment building is we know that tenants tend to turn over more quickly than owner-occupied dwellings. Who's going to provide the constant education and onboarding to these residents? Not an out-of-town developer, not these law interns, septic, well, what to do when the power goes out. There's just so many components to this that why would you want people to live in this building when it's not even fair to them? So again,
I'll ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Again, I application and formulate a plan that will work and that's respectful for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Next up, we have Sally Connolly. Sally, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sally Connolly, and I've been a Woodbridge resident for over 25 years, and I strongly support the proposed amendment. The research conducted by the Open Community Alliances is compelling and points out the specific areas in which Woodbridge has violated state and federal laws by enacting and maintaining zoning regulations that exclude specific housing types and lot size. Woodbridge is situated in a richly diverse region. We benefit greatly from being a part of this larger community, but for too long we have kept ourselves apart. We benefit, but we do not share. Opponents to the amendments describe our, quote, unique culture, unquote, and a situation in which our, quote, zoning regulations, the foundation of the quality of life in our town, are under serious threat, end quote. Is Woodbridge so bucolic and so similar to a gated community that it needs to protect some sacrosanct way of life? How exactly would multifamily housing destroy or threaten Woodbridge? There is a specious argument posited that if you work hard enough, then you deserve to live in Woodbridge. However, it is not a matter of how hard one works, but rather the salaries earned from hard work. It is not whether someone works hard, but the remuneration gained from a job that enables an individual to access quality housing. The many incidences of racial discrimination have shed light on our policies and culture within our local communities and states. While we cannot always rectify past inequities, we can and must confront the present situation. It is not a time to sit in the sidelines and turn away from difficult realities. We can and must do better. Let us extend the concept of neighborhood to include the surrounding communities and to develop a more regional approach to addressing poverty, income disparities, and racial ethnic discrimination. The Zoning Commission should turn away from our complex history and turn toward becoming a full and welcoming neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Sally, if you could click the hand icon again, please. Next up, we have Matt McDermott. And Matt, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Matt McDermott. I'm a resident of Woodbridge for the last 9 years. With my wife and 2 daughters, we've had the privilege of sending our kids to Beecher Road and the Amity school system. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of the proposal. I think it's really an invitation for us to look honestly at the history of the region and the history of Woodbridge. And I think the proposal that the Open Communities Alliance has put forward lays out a pretty damning record. For over 80 years, the town of Woodbridge has only increased its lot size requirements and tightened its zoning restrictions. and dozens of proposals over the years that have sought to turn those restrictions back or to allow multifamily housing in certain parts of town have been routinely and regularly and entirely, down to the last one, rejected. So I think it's a moment in time for us to take an honest look at what Woodbridge has done, and to see this not as a radical proposal, I think, as some are characterizing it, but really a modest proposal. 2 to 4 units on lots that are 1.5 acres, frankly, are not that many units. I live on Hunting Hill, and some new houses that have gone up recently in our area are massive single-family homes. The footprint and the scale of those buildings could easily hold 2 to 4 units without being any different than they are as they exist today. And I think there has to be an honest reckoning about how this does, how our zoning regulations have locked in racial and income privileges to residents that have lived here a long time or been able to buy into Woodbridge. Right, our system, zoning is not the only way in which racial wealth gaps have been created or racial discrimination has been exercised, of course, but it is one way in which, you know, in the many decades since things like the Fair Housing Act passed and other elements of discrimination have been made illegal, like redlining, zoning has been one way in which those disadvantages to ethnic and racial minorities have been locked in as privileges and advantages for people who are more white and more wealthy. And I think it's high time that Woodbridge take leadership. I think we like to think of ourselves as leaders of this greater community and leaders in the state. Certainly we do on the educational front. And I think it's time for us to take the opportunity and the invitation of this proposal to look honestly and take a hard look at what we've done. We're not the only community by far, but it's a pattern that we have embraced, and we need to take active steps to undo. One of the previous commenters said that we should reject this proposal and come up with our own. If we had done that in the last 80 years, I might agree with that. But we have not done that in the last 80 years. We have rejected every proposal and only increased restrictions. So I think the proposal is an invitation for us to do better, and I welcome it, and I encourage you on the zoning board or the Town Planning and Zoning Commission to do so as well.
Thank you for your comments, and if you could please lower your virtual hand. Thank you.
Next up, we have Andrew Danzig. Andy, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Betsy, and thank you, commissioners, for allowing this space for us to talk. After reading my friend Chuck Pine's from across the aisle articles in the Woodbridge Town News, I'm encouraged to let my voice be heard by the Woodbridge Residents for Town Planning flyer that you mentioned. I have no idea who they are. I have no association with them. And I reviewed the complete application, 5 pages from the Open Communities Alliance. I respectively submit the following comments on the application. Hope that feedback's not coming from me. Okay. The arguments against this application presented in the Woodbridge Town News, mailings, and other submissions to the commission, they appear to be more emotional than fact-based, and they actually lend credence to the applicant's claims for why the current Woodbridge zoning regulations and plan of conservation and development need to be changed. Opponents' claims that the proposed multifamily structure will stress well water and septic systems is not supported by any engineering analysis. To the contrary, the proposed system meets all health department requirements. The size of the multifamily structure, about 5,500 square feet, is smaller than many single-family houses in Woodbridge. For some reason, a 9-car parking area is offensive, while 3 or 5-car garages with 6, 8 more vehicles parked outside an 8,000 plus square foot home is not. The language used by the opponents, non-resident troublemakers, zoning regulations are the foundation of the quality of life in our town. overpopulation can create health hazards, safety concerns, the race card being played. These are intended to reinforce the underlying attitudes that have prevailed since Woodbridge was incorporated 250 years ago. The foundation for the current lack of racial diversity in towns like Woodbridge, across Connecticut and this country, lie in exclusionary spot zoning laws, racial restrictive covenants, redlining, denial of FHA and GI Bill mortgages for Black Americans, access to public transportation, difficulty African Americans had in obtaining mortgages and insurance, among others. These segregationist policies had fears that poor people will increase crime and reduce property values. In reality, property values increased because minorities had to pay more to buy into white and integrated communities. Poverty is not a crime. I imagine that, like me, most of you came from families whose parents or grandparents were poor, and they did not end up in a life of crime. What is a crime is that all previous attempts to amend these regulations have been rebuffed. Woodbridge's current zoning regulations clearly violate the Connecticut General Statutes 8.2 and the town's own affordable housing district requirements and the grant of conservation and development. As much as everyone wants to believe Woodbridge is an open and welcoming community for one and all, the overriding impediment to all being able to live here is the cost of housing.
I'd ask you to wrap up, please.
Absolutely. So one of the measures of diversity is not just the percentage of people, but a more important measure would be the demographics is to look at the composition of the town board of selectmen, the board of finance, commissions such as yours, the police and fire department, the Woodbridge Land Trust and Parks Associations, board of education, teachers and administrators in our schools, and most apropos to the topic at hand, real estate agents in this town. So the key thing here is that there are subtle things that can happen that are outside of zoning. When my parents moved to Connecticut many years ago, a realtor told them, oh, you'll like this neighborhood, you know, there's no Jews here. So things can be said. So anyway, I encourage you to approve this application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Can you please lower your virtual hand?
Next up, we have Jean Millard. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Betsy. My name is Jean Malo, and I have lived at 60 Dillon Road for almost 20 years with my husband and 2 children, both of whom attended Beecher Road School, Amity Middle School, Bethany, and Amity High School. In addition, I have been a teacher at Beecher for 16 years. I strongly support this application. I spoke at the last zoning meeting about the benefits of living in a diverse community. I continue to believe that all the citizens of Woodbridge, especially children, will thrive when we welcome people of different economic, cultural, racial, and educational backgrounds to our town. Tonight, however, I want to focus on some of the misinformation that has been circulating about the application for a zoning regulation amendment and an amendment to the town plan of conservation and development. I have listened to many residents of Woodbridge discuss this issue at meetings and on social media, and it is clear to me that many people lack an understanding of some important facts. First, some opponents say that they are concerned about the safety of the town's water. There is no evidence that multifamily housing will have any negative impacts on the town's water supply. Similarly, claims that increased traffic patterns will affect safety in town are unfounded. Simply printing these false claims on a piece of paper and mailing it out to residents does not make them true. It's irresponsible fear-mongering to do so. In addition, some residents say they are worried that crime will increase and that property values will fall. Again, there is no evidence that crime increases or that property values are negatively affected by the introduction of affordable housing in a community. Experts who spoke at the November meeting refuted these claims. The worries about water quality, increased traffic, increased crime, and plummeting home values are perhaps understandable, but they are unfounded. What should concern residents more is the fact that the town's current zoning regulations violate state and federal laws. This is undisputed. If this commission refuses to approve this proposal, the town will be faced with a lawsuit. The town will lose that lawsuit, but not before it spends tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars defending it. And in the end, affordable housing will still come to Woodbridge, where it belongs. Opponents of change in Woodbridge cite their desire to preserve the, quote, rural character, unquote, of our town. I love the open spaces and natural beauty of this town as much as anyone else. But I also believe that our town will be much more beautiful when we offer opportunities to live and learn here to a more diverse population. Everyone deserves a chance to live in Woodbridge. Let us welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and you already lowered your hand.
Next up, we have Ian Glassman. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Greetings. I hope that everyone watching and listening is well, healthy, and safe. My name is Ian Glassman, and I am currently a senior at Amity Regional High School. Having grown up in this community, I feel strongly that I would have benefited from a more racially diverse environment. Throughout my years, I've attended a summer camp full of diverse individuals and found the experience enriching. Hearing my peers' perspectives and lived experiences that differ from mine gave me a better sense of the real world. I'm fortunate that from a young age, I've realized how important it is to get along with people who come from different backgrounds. I've recently looked up the town's demographics and learned that only around 3% of Woodbridge residents are Black. Unfortunately, this isn't some coincidence. Numbers do not naturally happen like this. I hope that we can be reflective and try to rectify this, given that this issue has affected and continues to affect the daily lives of many Black and brown people. I am strongly in favor of this proposal. The town of Woodbridge will remain the town of Woodbridge. It's what we make of it. I do not question it will take some work to build affordable housing, but if anyone has agency, Woodbridge does, and it will ultimately make for a better community. This is a matter of where our priorities lie. Thank you for your time. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to submit comments, and I wish everyone a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Glassman. And if you could please lower your hand.
Next up, we have Mark Estra. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Betsy. I just double checked. Could you hear me? I have an old microphone on here.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Again, my name is Mark Estra, 174 Center Road in Woodbridge. My wife and I have lived here in Woodbridge for about 25 years. We built this house 25 years ago. Prior to living here in Woodbridge, we lived in downtown Wallingford in a multifamily house. And one of the major differences I see between where we were living in Wallingford and this application is that we had all utility services provided to us at this multifamily house in downtown Wallingford. Natural gas service, city water, city sewer, all things that I believe are necessary for dense housing. And just because we're putting one location here on Orchard Road doesn't mean down the road, 2 years from now, the house next door and the next door to that, these could all be the same with multifamily housing. So I think that we have to be concerned what the overall load will be on the environment in that particular location, wherever these multifamily houses come. I sent a letter into the commissioners last week, and it details more of the information that I've researched. And one of the things I'm concerned about is well water. I have a well that's 400 feet deep at my property, and my neighbors on either side of me have already switched over to city water because there is city water available where I live. But in the summertime, my water turns brown, and I'm told there's nothing to do about it. What's going to happen, especially with the overall global warming and everything, and less rain, when this property potentially is drawing on more water than a normal single-family house will, and it's going to affect the neighbors on either side. I strongly suggest that you have a hydrologist brought in as a consultant to confirm that there's going to be adequate water for the neighbors. I saw the application had space for 9 vehicles for parking. In my opinion, that's inadequate. Just think of, and I think as one of the other speakers mentioned earlier, if you have a birthday party, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, there's not going to be enough parking. I don't think there's any house in Woodbridge here that only has space for two cars to park. It's just not reasonable. I think that if you're going to put a multifamily house up, you need to have at least 3 or 4 spaces per residence. Right? And that's just going to add more to runoff with non-pervious surface. One of the items that I noticed in the application, it didn't make any mention of what the heating fuel is going to be. So either it's going to be, in Woodbridge, it's either going to be fuel oil or it's going to be propane. Building code only allows 660 gallons or 2 fuel tanks in the basement. What are they going to do? They're going to be burying tanks in the backyard for heating. Again, another concern for the environment. I don't think they're going to be putting electric heat in these properties, in this property. It's just too expensive to maintain, and it's not environmentally friendly to be using electric heat. Those are some of the concerns I have. The other thing I think you should be concerned about is that somehow there's a relationship between Garden Homes Management and the applicant. And I took a look at some of the other properties that Garden Homes Management put up, and not too far from us, just up in Bethany.
And I'll ask you to wrap up as well.
Sure. Up in Bethany, just up on Amity Road, you take a look, and what they're calling pre-manufactured housing is actually mobile homes. And I've included that in the letter, some photographs I have from other applications and other installations that this Garden Home Management has done. So again, I have a lot more information and details in the letter that I sent into the office. I suggest that you take a look at it and review it. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you for your comments. And if you could please lower your hand.
Next up, we have Christopher Perry. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hello and good evening. I recently moved to Bridge about 5 months ago. I am a military veteran, come from a small town in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I grew up in dense populated areas, and I am a recipient of hard work. And I'm kind of afraid of our discussions today because there's a lot of different perspectives, and I appreciate everybody's values and empathy towards some of the loaded language that we see in this proposal. The thing that I'm most worried about is that we're damaging meritocracy and people that actually have to work for a living to provide for their families that want to move to a sustainable neighborhood to give their children a life that they did not possess when they did, is going to be damaging towards people like me. I didn't really have any engaged talking points or anything. I'm pretty ill prepared. I'm just pretty much going off of emotion at the point, and I believe that anything more should be said for me to disagree with the proposal. And I kind of believe it's more of a strong arm attempt to force the town into something that is not proven. Based upon my life experience, I would definitely like to sit down and prepare some written statements if needed. But I appreciate the time to speak, and thank you everybody for the stage.
So thank you very much for your comments, and please do submit written comments. The public hearing will remain open after today, and they can go to Christine Sullivan. If you could please lower, I think you already did, Chris, thank you. Back to you.
Next up, we have Evan Stark. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Betsy. I strongly support amending the current zoning regulations in the plan of conservation and development. 50 years ago, as newlyweds in New Haven, are you getting a feedback on it as I am?
Yes, we are getting feedback. I'm not sure either Betsy or Chris, if someone is unmuted or if someone has it on in the background on their TV.
Well, I mean, essentially that's what they're saying. You're just going to give away,
I think we're actually also
in new housing for free. It's like,
Chris Perry may I think we may still have a few folks who are unmuted who from the past. Let's see if
Should I mute myself? I'm sorry.
Can I start again?
yes, of course.
Well, I support the proposal. I started to say that 50 years ago, as newlyweds in New Haven with 4 children, little savings, and a mortgage, Anne Flitcraft and I chose to sacrifice our quality of life to invest in the future by deferring a share of our shared income to pensions. The investment paid off. Anne Flitcraft, MD, and I have lived at 11 Forest Trail in Woodbridge for more than 20 years. 3 of our sons finished high school here. My mother, a poor girl from the Bronx, worked all of her life at the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters in New York and was the school secretary, died in the house. And she never enjoyed herself living more than she did in the last years here with images of birds in the woods. No one wants to lose that. Pensions work because of the collective sacrifice so that individuals' futures can thrive. Affordable housing is like a pension. It entails a small sacrifice now, a collective deferral on the part of a town for payoff later on. It is a bet on the future in which individuals thrive not because their wealth increases, which it may do, but because the quality of all of our lives is enriched by increments in equity, diversity, and justice. The opposition is right. Affordable housing is not a sure bet. No more than was a pension. No more than is any investment. But with proper oversight, development is as much of a dead end on the restrictive policies, is as much of a dead end as the restrictive policies we currently follow. Segregated housing in the United States is not the result of government action alone. Citizens like you and me help to make it and must help unmake it. My family helped break the restrictive covenants that kept Jews like us out of Bronxville, New York in the 1950s. So I can tell you that financial institutions, real estate developers, and citizen homeowners themselves combine to enforce segregation in housing that is similar to what we confront here today. It will take the combined effort of these same actors to reverse the trend. Approving a zoning change and then turning our backs on what is done in our name is the worst kind of cynicism. The opposition is also right about another thing. Affordable housing implies a certain kind of future. That future includes the future that includes affordable housing is one in which equity, diversity, economic growth, and preservation are viewed not only as compatible, but as inseparable values for community survival.
I'll ask you to wrap up.
Okay. This is because in the near future, our problems will not be only our problems alone, but our problems are the problems of the entire region, the towns around us, and the states and cities and the country, and we will need their support. And we'll get their support to the extent that we look and are like them. One final point, please. The opposition says Woodbridge will change. I want you to look around us. Woodbridge has changed. Among the people I meet at the gardens and the library and the senior center and the markets are persons from all countries and ages and walks of life. They share a consensus not only on the issues, reducing pollution, improving our schools and whatever, but they share the belief that diversity, equity, and commitment to a common purpose are the proper measure of our success. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And if you could please lower your hand and remute yourself. Thank you.
Next up, we have Daniel Cowan. You've been unmuted. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to comment quickly on something that was said at the last meeting. Someone said that, that low-income housing is an opportunity for somebody to step up in a community. As a person who actually lived in low-income housing myself in Stratford.
I did. Now I'm done talking.
Hello? Okay. As someone who actually lived in low-income housing in Stratford myself, the big difference between that opportunity and the actual leg up I was given was ownership in the house. So we were able to, my wife and I were able to use the market upswing in 2007 to liquidate that property and then buy our property here in Woodbridge. And had we been a renter, somebody else would have made the benefit of that investment that we had made. So I think that all we're doing is throwing change around people's necks, putting them into a rental environment where they're not going to be owning equity, and they will. So I think that we can have affordable housing in Woodbridge that is owner occupied, small houses that are appropriately built, and that should be the strategy that Woodbridge goes with our current regulations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could lower your hand.
Next up, we have Joanna Martinez. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. First of all, let me tell you that I did not come with pre-prepared remarks. I actually happened to look at Facebook at exactly 6 o'clock and saw that this was taking place, and so I joined. But I have been moved to say a few words given on what I've heard. My family, my husband and I and our children, live down the street. We live down Newton Road from the proposed multifamily home. Today celebrates 27 years that we've owned that home, and we represent some of the diversity that exists in Woodbridge today. My husband is a Cuban immigrant, and the kinds of things that people have talked about, getting an education, working your way from the ground up, that is what we have lived. So I agree with the individual earlier on who talked about the fact that the plan needs to be Woodbridge driven, not driven by these folks from New Haven, whose motives, honestly, I question. We have, over the last 27 years, recognized the rules around lot size, around setbacks. We've respected the wetlands rules that have been in place and made sure that anything we did to our property reflected that. To suddenly have down the street a parking lot, sitting in front of a building, a real concern for us about public transportation. We have heard about Woodbridge potentially being on the public transportation chopping block. What happens to these people who have become effectively stranded there if they don't have public transportation to rely on? We also, as one of the other individuals spoke, have a very deep well. Ours is more than 300 feet deep. What is that going to mean to my water system going forward? As I listen to all of this, I don't doubt the high motives of some of the Woodbridge residents that I've heard. But as I just said a few minutes ago, I think it's a tremendous disservice to the folks who will be sitting there so far away from the services they will need, and can't help but wonder if there isn't a location closer to walking distance to the stores and closer to the kinds of services that people are going to need as they continue with their lives. I worry what the town. We already struggle with taxes. I worry we are one of the highest, taxpayers in town in terms of residences. The people on our street. What is that going to mean in terms of the taxes that we have to pay going forward if more services are needed just to support that? And of course, as other people say, I worry about that kind of need popping up all over the place in all of the vacant lots or the lots that become available over time. We're spending millions of dollars right, on the Woodbridge Country Club because people want to preserve the look of and the feel and the of the community. I agree that Woodbridge has had an issue and hasn't dealt with it in the past, but perhaps this situation is the significant emotional event that Woodbridge needs to actually take action and come up with a Woodbridge-driven plan instead of one handed to us. I listened months ago to an interview. I read an interview with one of
I'll ask you to wrap up soon.
Yeah. With one of the Yale students who was involved in this, and I couldn't help but think as I read it, what an interesting set of bullets this would provide for that individual's resume. So I think Woodbridge has to take the its residents into consideration, not these people from the outside. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could lower your hand.
Next up, we have Karen Leibowitz. Karen, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, this is actually Jacob Leibowitz. I am 23 and I went to Amity High School, grew up here. And I think that one of the most important services that our town offers is our amazing public schools. We have really, really amazing public schools, which can help push people on to career paths that can help them to earn a lot of money. But unfortunately, most people in my generation can't afford to move to this town to get access to education for their children and to continue allowing people to move up the socioeconomic ladder. People in my generation have very low savings, very high debt, low credit, and really have no opportunity to move into these sort of towns that will offer their children the same exact opportunities that people like me were given. People need good educations to get jobs in the future. And if people can't afford good school districts, it will perpetuate the cycle of economic segregation in our town. And the coronavirus pandemic has only really made this worse. The rich have continued to get richer, the poor have continued to get poorer, and if we continue to allow our education system to perpetuate the extremes of our economic system, there's no way that our future will be as bright as our past was. And also, as a result of this, we are at risk of allowing our town to age out because our younger generations no longer have the ability to come in, to take advantage of these schools and these things that we have really provided for our residents. So I want to just ask, what future do you want for your children? Would you be okay telling your child they don't deserve to live here, even though they work very hard just because they don't have the ability to get a high-paying job in the future? And so for that reason, I am strongly in favor of changing the zoning in this town.
Great. Thank you, Jacob, for your comments. If you could lower your hand, please. I'm going to just do a time check. We are going today until 7:20, plus or minus. And it looks like we still have, I see 6 or 7 hands still raised. So we'll likely continue through public comments. For those who unfortunately we don't get to tonight, at the end I will announce we're going to continue the meeting probably until February 1st at our next regular meeting. So thank you in advance for the patience for the public and to Attorney Herbst. It looks like we may hear from you at that following February. So thank you for your patience as well.
Next up, we have Carrie Gross. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Carrie Gross. Can you guys hear me? Great, thank you. Our family has been here in Woodbridge for 20 years. We moved here to our nice 1.5 acre lot because of the school system. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed with the back and forth in this conversation because it is these halting conversations where people can call out concerns about parking lots being an eyesore, concerns about 400-foot wells, concerns about what happens to people if their public transportation ceases. You know, people are adults, people are clever, people are able to overcome these issues. And I think it's very paternalistic to say we don't know what people will do if they move in and the bus route changes. But at the end of the day, conversations like this are why systemic racism persists. This past June, our town had what I think was a banner day for our town. The middle of June, after George Floyd's murder, over 250 people marched about 3 miles through the center of town to protest against racism, to protest in favor of taking action to actually ensure our Black and brown fellow citizens, fellow people know that we care about them. So I just don't understand how we can have these marches, how we can carry signs, put signs on our lawns, post things on Facebook, and then at the end of the day say, well, geez, I really don't want any more Black people to move into our town. And let's be clear, we are talking about race. And to say at the end of the day, we don't want people moving into our town because I'm really worried about the sewage system. Finally, I know I want to keep these things brief. When we talk about our solutions being Woodbridge driven, and I agree with that. Our town should guide the solutions. But our town, like Matt McDermott said, our town's had 80 years to deal with this. We haven't demonstrated our ability to put forth practical solutions. So now is the time. And a final thought is someone made a comment about how one of the students from Yale was making comments or all these bullet points in favor of affordable housing. And doesn't that sound like that would be great as bullet points for their resume? But I would ask, what's the resume of our town? Our town has a resume too. And our people who are on our zoning commission, you all have resumes as well. So when people like Ian Glassman, a high school senior, is looking up to our leaders, looking back at the town that he graduates from, what's he going to look upon? Is he going to say, we've made a difference? My leaders, the adults in my life, my role models actually changed 80 years of history, or they just keep doing the same thing and punt the ball down the field 2 years at a time. We'll reassess, form a subcommittee, doom things to end this discussion. So that's all, but thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you for your comments. If you could lower your hand, and let's see who is next.
Evan Stark is next.
I think we already heard from Evan Stark, though.
We did. Do you want me to skip to the next person in line?
Unless there's someone else in his house that is using this.
Do you want me to check?
Yeah, let's check. But then we should
Mr. Stark?
to Evan.
Mr. Stark, I've unmuted you. Hello?
Let's skip to the next one then.
Sounds good. Liva Andrzejeva is next. You've been unmuted.
Yes. So we, my husband and I, and my mom and my son recently moved to 26 Oxbow. And we are Latvian Americans, and we very much enjoy the living here. It's beautiful, and the schools are great. And I do think that I absolutely agree with everyone who spoke before, and that I do think the solution is best to come from us, because otherwise we will get something that we really don't like. And we lived in New Haven for many years, and there were a lot of predatory landlords. I won't name the companies, but you may perhaps be aware of some of them. So I would be somewhat worried about them coming to town and building substandard housing for people that then they would subsequently exploit. That would, basically trap into these situations where if they complain, they're being threatened, and so I do think the solution should come from within. I also agree that it would be great if we can offer something that is a bit closer to existing amenities. We ourselves considered living a bit closer to the grocery stores, but we just couldn't find anything at the point that was quite suitable. But I do think that is a great place to live if there is not already in the transportation infrastructure present to. So there are a couple of actually large parcels of land that appear to be empty. And again, I don't know too much about this yet, but I wonder if this is something that could be considered, again, as part of the solution, and also a way to offer people maybe something rent to own. So they build kind of equity and pride of ownership, and rather than constantly being, renters.
Landlords.
So I think that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for your comments. If you could please lower your virtual hand.
Next up, we have David Jensen. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my comments. This is David Jensen. I live at 46 Newton Road with my wife, Allison. We had 2 children living with us who have moved away, but they both had the benefit of the Woodbridge school districts, including Amity High School, and we're very grateful for that. I'd just like to make a couple of points. One is the idea of affordable housing, I believe, should be maybe asked in a different way. We have property in town down on Litchfield Turnpike that is zoned for denser housing, yet it hasn't been built on. So I've never really understood the reasoning for that, but it seems to me that the question of affordable housing could be addressed simply by promoting construction in that zone and bringing in lower cost residences. Second, I observe that the filing seems to imply that affordable housing is going to encourage racial diversity. And to me, that's something of a perverse argument. It's actually saying that we expect lower incomes to be of a different race. And that is inherently racist, in my opinion. Third, we have a very tough tax bill in this town, and we seem to be deleveraging on a continuous basis where our mill rate goes up, and certainly we're not increasing services by any means. And I think that adding saturation of population without increasing the tax base is very concerning, because if you put 4 families into a building that will probably not generate much more tax than a single family residence, I'm very concerned about the multiplying effect on the demand for services, but the lack of increased revenue for the town. That's really the 3 points that are top of mind for me. And I certainly welcome anyone else's thoughts on those.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next up, we have Justin Parker. You've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I've lived in Woodbridge here on 1050 Racebrook Road for the last eight and a half years. I do also believe that the town should have ownership in deciding how this is. But again, as many people mentioned so far, there's several decades now of the town denying other requests. So I question our ability to do that. I'm not against affordable housing, but it needs to be done smartly. To naively assume that because the housing development is going to be the same footprint of, say, a larger home, my home is not large, that it's going to have the same consumption rate is illogical. Yeah, I mean, when you have multiple people drawing from the aquifer, you have multiple people using the leaching fields for septic, it's going to put a significant burden when they're talking over 1,840 units that they want to put in their proposal over the next several years or decades, whatever it is. So it needs to be done, possibly city water, city sewer. It needs to be done smart. I do believe we should have ownership in it is the best way. I'm absolutely concerned with the increase in taxes and devaluing of property, as ignorant as it might be. And I say that because I have not educated myself on it. I'm relying, I guess, naively on other people to do it for me, which I know is inherently wrong, but it needs to be factored in. I'm barely making it out as it is. I just welcomed a third member to my family a few weeks ago, and just to convert my garage into living space is an ungodly amount, and I don't even know what the town's going to hit me with for taxes afterwards. So it's not affordable, barely affordable for me, and I really love this community. I'd like to see a change, and I'd like to see diverse income families and housing in here, but it needs to be done smart. Our town does have a way of spending money on things that I feel are necessary, adding 10,000 square feet to the police station, adding on repaving the parking lot instead of just sealing it. I mean, it's a parking lot, $23 million, even if it was subsidized, public works facility. There's a whole gambit of things that I feel we could spend more smartly for those of us that aren't as wealthy and do enjoy the community. I would like to keep the integrity of the community. I do, again, just to repeat myself, feel it should be welcomed for the housing. Parking is a concern. Constraints in the schools is a concern. We just need to spend a lot of time and a lot of thought and do things differently, because Country Club of Woodbridge, for example, it's been over 10 years and we still haven't a plan with that. And I don't know how we're going to come up with this for like several thousand people additioning into the town. That's all I really have to say. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for putting this together, and for everyone else that has spoken so far tonight. I realize it must be the last one. Have a good night and Happy New Year, folks.
Thank you for your comments. I will note that, as Mr. Parker did, that we did we did hit our 7:20 mark, which, according to the rules of a special meeting, we announce it for a specific designated time, and my carrying on will actually go over that time a little. So apologies for folks, because I do see there's still a number of hands raised. For those who still have their hand raised, we are going to continue this meeting until February 1st at our regular TPZ meeting, which, Chris, our regular meeting start times, we've changed that for February going forward, right? That's 6:30 start time. Is that correct? I think our commission members.
Yes, you're correct. I was correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So, so I do want to thank Betsy and Chris for managing our WebEx and keeping things moving. I want to thank our commission members and the applicants and interveners for all being good listeners. But most of all, I really want to thank the members of the public for their participation tonight, and from last time, and for next time as well. I know this is not easy under a pandemic, and that folks can get frustrated with the technology, but your patience is appreciated entirely. For those who didn't have a chance to speak tonight, or you want to digest, we are continuing the meeting until February 1st. You also have the opportunity, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, to send in written comments, and we encourage those. They must be sent directly to Chris Sullivan. Those become part of the official record. And it's an opportunity for folks to put their thoughts down on paper and have them in front of us. So with that, I will continue our public hearing until February 1st. Do I need a motion for? Yeah, my lawyer always says that you should do a motion. So Paul, looks like you have a question before we do that.
I'm going to make that motion. But before I do that, could you just remind the public that there is another meeting at 7:30 in the details, so that people don't think that we left out our regular meeting for this month? And then on top of that, Rob, I move that we continue this hearing to our next meeting in February.
Great, thank you, Paul. And Paul is right. Right after this at 7:30, which is why we need to end this and start the next one. We're having a public hearing on the brewery relocation, which is an item that's been available on the town website. So we're not done, but for the public, you guys can go have dinner and be with your family. My dinner may be delivered by a kid at some point, hopefully. But Paul Schatz has moved to continue our public hearing until February 1st. Do I see a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we will continue our public hearing. Thank you all for an interesting and thoughtful and respectful comments today. And we look forward to seeing you in February.